Okay, so welcome everybody. As usual, first of all, thanks to our sponsors, Source Labs, TUI, Amusement, and Trendic for helping to promote these events, paying the fees, and helping us to organize the online event. So also special thanks and shout out to Severin and Aurelian, my teammates in the Orga team, who are always so supportive. And yeah, if you missed the previous meetups, so you can visit our webpage, continuoustestingmeetup.com. There you will find the recordings or the link to the recordings from the previous events. So now let's start with our today's talk. So we have Ilya with us. Ilya is located in Tiflis, and he is working as head of customer success at Quays. And we will talk with him about the question, do customers define quality? I'm very interested in the answers. So to all participants, as usual, please mute yourself, and you will have the opportunity to ask all your questions after the presentation of Ilya. And yeah, I would say I stop sharing my screen. So Ilya, it's your stage now. I hand over to you, and yeah, have fun.
All right. Thank you, Anya. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everybody. Nice to be here today. Thank you very much for having me at Continuous Testing Meetup. My name is Ilya, or Eli. I'm a customer success manager at Case, as Anya has presented me. And today I wanted to talk to you about this question that I have as the topic of the presentation: customers define quality, or do they? Kind of a bit of a controversial. I put the question mark at the end for the very specific reason, but you'll see why exactly I've done that during my talk and after the talk as well. Now, before we get into the serious stuff, I wanted to begin with a kind of a little story from my background, from my past. And if you have seen the movie Four Rooms by Quentin Tarantino, you probably get the reference. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend watching it. It's hilarious. But in my early career, while I was in the university, I was actually working in hotels. So I was doing night shifts. I used to work in all different kinds of hotels, small ones, big ones, huge ones, fancy ones as well. And one experience from my career back then actually stood out for me very much. And I kind of keep that experience with me up until this day. One night, I was working my shift as per usual. I was back then working at a very fancy five-star hotel where a room per night was probably as much as I was earning a month. So it was quite a good hotel, to put it that way. But yeah, as I said, I was working a night shift. We had just one guest left for the entire night. The entire hotel was booked out, so we were expecting a pretty quiet shift as well. That guest eventually comes. I give him the keys. I walk him to the room. I show him around his suite that he booked. And he walks around. He checks it out, looks at everything. Finally, we get into the bedroom. He turns around, looks at me with a very sour face, with a very sour expression on his face. And he says, "Why is the bathroom so far from the bedroom?" And literally at that moment, I had no words. I had nothing to counter him. There was nothing I could say. But that actually that taught me a great lesson, I would say, that what we understand as the quality of the product might be completely different from what our customers see and perceive as the quality of the product. And it applies obviously not only to hotels or only to software, it essentially applies to any relationships where there is a customer and there is a producer of service or a good or whatever else. But of course, experience can be different. And if we're getting into serious stuff, let me set a stage and give you some, perhaps create some atmosphere. Imagine that you are getting ready for Christmas or a New Year, preparing celebrations, buying gifts together with your family, and then all of a sudden you get a text message like the one you see on the screen right now that tells you that you've got a very serious case of lung cancer all of a sudden. And it comes from the clinic that you actually usually go to, where you have appointments with your doctor. So it looks legit, right? That probably would be very, very bad news for you, of course. But imagine if it happened by accident. And that is, in fact, something that happened just this last Christmas in UK, where one of the clinics, as per medical practice, erroneously sent this message, this very message, not to one, not to 10, but to thousands of their clients from their client base. And obviously, they might have screwed up the holidays for a ton of people. Luckily, they sent out a message just right after this asking for sincere apologies. But I mean, those couple minutes that's have been between those two messages, probably many people had a very bad time during those. And obviously, you know, as a scenario like this, it could tarnish the reputation of an organization if something like this happens. So the implications of not treating quality in the right way can also be quite serious. But even this scenario and even this example is not the worst that can happen. Maybe some of you heard about THRAC 25. Maybe some of you haven't. And those of you that haven't, I will definitely tell you. Those of you that have heard about this very story, probably will be a good idea to just hear it again to remember why it's important to assure quality of the products. So anyway, THRAC 25 was a radiology machine that was manufactured by a Canadian company. It was commissioned back in the mid-80s. And so it was used in the clinics for cancer treatments. Now, there was a very serious defect with the machine that was actually rooted in the software. And because the machine was not working properly, 6 people were involved in the accidents that caused their ultimate death at the end of it. With the investigation that followed after those cases, there have been quite a few findings that are really unsettling. And this very case actually became kind of a textbook example for quality assurance and why it's important to make sure that the software works as it's expected to work. But among those findings, and when the investigation group, what they actually found was that the software that has been used, first of all, it has been created basically by a hobbyist, half-time software engineer who was just really doing it more for fun rather than for money. And he was not actually an employee of that company that was producing the machine. I can tell you that at the end of the investigation, it was not possible to even conclusively find the person that wrote the software. But that was not the only problem with the software. Another problem was that there was uncontrolled race condition that was causing the machine to give the dose of radiation hundreds or thousands times more than it was supposed to, due to the way that the race condition worked in this machine. Also, the software basically was never tested until it was already installed in the clinic. I mean, until the machine was installed in the clinic. So the entire integration testing phase has been effectively skipped. And also the software was not treated to be prone to any errors. Essentially, the hardware engineers thought of the software as fault-free by default for whatever reason. And their arrogance at the end of the day has caused multiple people to lose their lives as a result. So as I mentioned, this very example has become quite a textbook example for how the software quality assurance should be done and why it should be done in the first place, because sometimes the implications of not doing it properly can be drastic and can lead to someone losing their life. But you might ask me, say, if I'm not working with, mission critical systems or something where somebody else's life depends on how my software works. It doesn't really matter then that we really care about quality that much. Say if I'm producing a mobile game, what's the biggest risk that I take? That maybe I will lose a few tens or hundreds of my users and lose a fraction of ad revenue while they just go to the App Store and download a different time carrier for themselves. And actually, you are right as well, because it really does depend. And I mean, the perception of the quality and our need to guarantee that quality on different levels, it really does depend on multiple factors, one of which is exactly what I have been talking about: the seriousness and how our software can affect the lives of people. Obviously, if you're not dealing with the systems that are related to security, something like aviation, for example, or medical hardware and software, then of course you don't need those stringent procedures. But again, if you are dealing with areas where those stringent regulations are needed, those regulations are there for a reason, of course. But this graph basically tells us the story not only about the severity of how our software can affect people around us that use this software, but also it can be applied to maturity of the company and maturity of the software. If we're just beginning our life cycle of our product, if we're just at the startup phase, and and we don't know yet where to go, of course we can care a bit less about the quality because we have a long road ahead of us still. It also depends on the number of clients too, and it also fits into this graph. The more clients we have, the more responsibility we have to take for those clients. And obviously, none of us want to be in a situation like with this 3-rack machine, right? None of us want to be at risk when somebody didn't check properly how the software works. It's the last thing anyone wants, I think. So, but why am I telling you all that? And I'm telling you all that because I have been working as a customer success manager for quite a few years now. And as I already mentioned, I had some experience with even face-to-face communication with the clients before. So I know a thing or two about how people perceive the product and the quality. And I can tell you how your customer-facing teams can help you establish that quality and can help you ensure that the quality of the product you make, that you build, is higher. There is a very common idea that I've heard more than once, obviously, that the problems with market fit, the problems with products and how it actually fits and how customers use it, it usually begins when the developers start distancing from the clients. So if there is some kind of a barrier and the engineers do not talk to the clients, many people believe that's where the problem lies. But let me tell you something. The fact that there is a distance between the engineer and the client is actually a blessing in disguise, in my opinion. And let me tell you why I think that. If engineers had to talk to the clients on a regular basis, I believe that it's very hard and it requires a very certain mindset to take feedback. And clients share feedback. They love sharing feedback. They have all the ideas about our products. They have all the ideas about how to improve it. But not always that feedback they are willing to share is positive. Taking positive feedback is not a problem. It's great. Taking negative feedback is a different story. So for someone to take that negative feedback when it's concerning their own work that they've put a huge amount of hours into and not treat it as a personal jab is quite hard. So I see the customer-facing teams that talk to the clients and that help you communicate with the clients as kind of a shield for your engineering team that takes away that personal perception of the negative feedback that inevitably comes from the clients. It's just something that happens. Not all the people are happy about what we do. They might have some ideas about what is not working the way they expect it to work, and it's normal. But for the company, for the entire organization to take that negative feedback constructively I believe that it's really important to distance those that actually do the engineering work from those that consume this engineering work. Now, the customer-facing teams also can be a filter for you, a filter for your engineering and product teams, of course. And by filtering, I mean that you wouldn't believe how much incoherent or completely useless feedback I have heard and filtered over my years while I have been working as a customer success manager. Because there are a lot of times where people do not, I mean, our customers, of course, do not really either understand how the software works, or they have some very specific use cases that perhaps even fall into the area of not a perfect product fit for their team. And if that feedback was going directly to the product team, to the engineering team, for them to immediately act upon it, probably you would just have a mess of a product if you're just going for every single piece of feedback that is incoming and try to satisfy every single person that comes with that feedback to you and your team. But also what the customer-facing teams do is they enrich that feedback, that context. Imagine yourself in a scenario where you hear the question for the first time. So somebody asks you a question and you never gave it a thought before at all. It is obviously going to take you some time to investigate, to learn a bit about what the question is, so that you can come with a conclusive answer and provide that answer back. Imagine a different scenario where you have heard a question 100 times before in different contexts and different applications, and you already have an understanding of what this question is about. So in fact, when you hear a question for 100 times, you're not thinking about it as of a question, really. You start thinking about it as seeing the trends and seeing the underlying problems that lead to that question. And that's what your customer-facing teams can also do for you. They can be this enriching contextual data source to which you can go and find out what kind of problems your clients have and why they have those problems, how the clients use the software leads them to those problems. And that is perhaps something that we as an engineering, as a product team, can then fix based on this richer context that the customer-facing teams do have. But, saying all that, I just want you to have that point in your mind that if you don't have a customer-facing team in your company, maybe you are running a small startup, maybe you have a big company where obviously this function is already established. But if you have never given a thought how the customer-facing specific team can be helpful in ensuring the quality, that is my answer to you. And that is, of course, my opinion. But I strongly believe that those three functions are the ones that can help your product or engineering team the most to ensure that we do what the clients actually need. So with all that said, the question actually, it still stands. Do the clients define the quality of our products or do they not? And actually, I don't have an answer to that. Or rather say the question is both yes and no are fair. And it again boils down to many different factors. Of course, we should listen to our clients because at the end of the day, they are the ones that we're building the products for. But what if you have millions of clients and every one of them is willing to share the feedback with you? How would you operate with that volume of feedback? Because again, if you try to satisfy every single client and try to implement every single new feature that has been asked for, you'll probably have just a mess of a product that does not really satisfy anyone at all at the end of it. Again, if you have just 5 clients, for example, but each one of them brings you a great revenue, then of course, every single piece of feedback from each one of those clients is critical because you are targeting a very specific niche, a very small niche that is using your product heavily. Now, let's imagine if, let's say you have some unique vision. How does that fit into working with the feedback? And I can only say that only your team is capable of having that vision for your product and how it should evolve in the future. Just like that beat up quote attributed to Henry Ford goes, where he said that if I asked people what they need, they would probably tell me they needed a faster horse. It's kind of the same thing here, right? Your clients may have some feedback and some ideas how they would like to see the product improved, but they will never have the vision of the entire product and the background and the context that you have and the vision of how you want to evolve it in the future, because maybe it will be completely something unexpected for them, which is going to turn their processes around for the better. So that is all very much, that all should be very much considered as well. And yeah, so summarizing all of my points that I wanted to share with you today. Quality essentially means matching our clients' requirements. We want to make sure that our software does no harm. We want to make sure that our software solves the problem that the clients have. And we need to learn from them what their problems are. Mistakes, again, they can be very costly. It depends on the industry. It depends on how critical your software is. Sometimes the cost of the mistake is minuscule. Sometimes it can go up to costing somebody their life. So whenever you think about how the feedback should be treated, the cost of the mistake should be also factored in. For example, if we go back to my example of a hotel, when the customer was unhappy with the path that he has to take every single time going from the bedroom to the bathroom, the cost of mistake here was probably one client leaving the hotel and never returning back. But what would be the alternative then? Going to our construction team and rebuilding the entire hotel so that in every single room we have a smaller length to travel from the bedroom to the bathroom. It probably doesn't make sense. The third point I wanted to highlight again is use your customer-facing team's knowledge to enrich your product. Your customer-facing teams are the ones that are constantly in touch with your clients, that probably they are one of the few in the team, one of the few departments in the team that are directly connecting to the clients and that hear them, talk to them, speak to them every single day, and can provide you with this context too. And finally, at the end of it, ultimately, it is your product. It is up to you to decide where you want to take it, how you want to work with the feedback, if you want to consider it all, or if it's something that you do not really care about. But yeah, it's up to you to decide ultimately. So with that, I suppose my part is over. Yes, Anya, back to you.
Thanks, Ilya, for this insight. So now it's time for your questions, ladies and gentlemen. I already have a question. So customer feedback is really important. But how do you at your company collect the customers' feedback exactly?
Right. Mm-hmm. So I can tell that it happens in different layers. Obviously, we do segment the clients because we do have different pricing tiers, right? And realistically, we have to understand which feedback is more important, which feedback is less important. We cannot just take all the feedback, all the artifacts that we get coming in and prioritize them the same way. They will have different priority. So obviously, the most important feedback for us is going to be from those clients that are the most quote unquote valuable for us, the ones that are strategic for the company, the ones that are getting us essentially more revenue, right? Those are the ones that we'll be focusing on the most. Still though, there can be scenarios where we have a lot of requests from, let's say, those that are using our product for free. but they all come with the same idea. They are lacking something in the product. That also can be a signal that perhaps it's something that needs to be done. But ultimately, I can say that even though we might have a very large client asking for something specific, at the end of the day, it's still going to be our product vision that defines whether we go with that or whether we disregard that feedback. It's very important to learn to say no as well, because on the opposite, it can turn into just people coming in and like ordering from the menu, which it is not. Unless you're working as a software on-demand development company, then of course it makes sense. The client comes and requests something very specific. But if you're trying to cater to multiple audiences, multiple companies, and all of them are going to essentially be using the same product, it's very important to analyze and think what kind of solution is going to fit, if not all, but at least the majority of those that are going to be using your product. Okay. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah.
All right.
And I have another question. So do you have, so you are working in the customer facing team. Yep. And the developer teams usually are not customer facing. You already mentioned that. So yep. Do you have regular exchange meetings, kind of exchange meetings with the developer teams to bring the feedback of the customers to them, or how does it work?
It does work differently on different occasions and in different scenarios. For example, let's say if we are preparing a new feature for release, something that is like untreaded path, we never have done it before, and obviously our development guys need some feedback about it and how it's going to work like and what the customers think about it. So for those, of course, we plan ahead. We talk beforehand about how we want to approach it, when the release is coming. And then, then we are basically collecting the feedback. We do use some automations, as in we notify the people about this new upcoming feature, for example, and give them a chance to give their feedback as a reply. Then we collect all that and essentially pass back to the development team to see where there might be some area for improvement about this new feature. But of course, it's not always about new features, it's about existing features, because I really do believe that any new feature is actually you adding to your debt. Because whenever you release something, you're far from finished. You will have to support it, you will have to expand it, you will have to build up on it. And people, they do come asking for something more, even if that particular fragment of the software, even if that particular feature has already been in your product for years, but there is still something that can be improved. So those can be shared, but I would say that it's also a matter of trying to engage with as many clients as possible and seeing if this resonates with, just a few, or maybe it's really a big problem and then we need to consider it. We, by the way, one of the channels we use for collecting feedback is a public board. Basically, any of our clients, they can go into this public board, create a post with a suggestion for what they feel should be improved in the product, or a suggestion for a new feature. And others can also go into it, share their opinion, maybe even leave a comment, and upvote this very feature request. So that allows us to also kind of monitor what are the popular requests or what are the ones that are hotter and that we maybe need to consider. But again, I really strongly believe that it shouldn't be treated as a, I don't even like the word request per se. It's not really a request, it's a suggestion. When we shape it as a request, it feels like it's an order made, right? Please go and do this. I gave you an instruction for what I need, but it's not really that. Especially when we're building a cloud-based product that is going to look the same for thousands of people or millions of people. It rarely works that way, where we can do something custom for one particular client. And also, any such approach, whenever you open up to the audience and provide them with a way to suggest things, it definitely needs moderation. So you have to consider, if you want to do it this way, you'll have to consider moderation too, because when it is abandoned, when nobody takes care of it or manages it, it can actually generate more negativity rather than positivity. If you see your feature request hanging open for 2 or 3 years, you obviously see that nobody cares about it. Nobody does anything about it. And it kind of closes the loop to that scale of saying no. We are very often biased to satisfy the clients, right? But sometimes we need to be a bit harder. And if it's not really something that fits into our product strategy at all, it is better to say no and say that, well, I'm sorry, we're not going to be doing that, unfortunately. As much as we understand that you would like to see that, that does not really fit into our vision, rather than leaving it open and hoping that it will disappear, or the client that asked it will forget about it eventually.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Ilya.
Thank you, Anya.
I have another question. So I assume talks like this don't come up in a vacuum. So you are in a fairly young company, I would say. So I assume like the first few times you got feedback, this was like the only feedback, right? You got. So at what point did you realize, oh, we have to actually differentiate between the types of feedback, or at what point was the volume so great that you had to put them into different boxes, let's say? How was that experience from the one person using your software giving you feedback in the beginning, let's say?
Right. So, basically I can probably put my finger on 3 main channels we use for collecting feedback. One of them is support. So any live conversations in the chat, people, of course, share their thoughts and opinions about the product. The second one is the public board I just mentioned. And the third one is actually through customer success, where customer success is someone who builds more strategic relationships with larger clients. And obviously, we can dive deeper into their use cases. And those 3 really, I would say, are those buckets that we can classify for this feedback. Something that comes from the customer success team is something that probably is the most valuable, because we have much broader context about how customers use the product, what kind of process they have, what they have been doing, what kind of pitfalls they have already fallen into. And based on that, we can accumulate that knowledge and translate those ideas back into CTO or product manager or someone else who's ultimately responsible for the shape of the product. Because usually, of course, it depends on what market you're targeting, right? If you are working strictly for SMBs, or if you see your ideal customer profile as an SMB company, you're not then going into enterprise, and you're not probably going to cater to the enterprise requests like super sophisticated security or something like this, because your main market, your target market, SMBs, they don't really care about that much. So you also have to consider who is your ICP, who's your ideal customer, who's your ideal persona that you want to essentially sell your product to and have them successfully use it. And with that, you need, of course, to prioritize that channel that will matter the most. Then, say, if we're talking about mobile development, for instance, if you see that the latest release of the app on the App Store got 1s across the board, probably something went wrong. And that's a very valid and quick way for you to understand that you've done something wrong. And probably those changes, they will be highlighted in the comments of those reviews for sure. As for B2B, where the size of the deal is larger and where the clients can be companies with hundreds and thousands of people, obviously, even within the company itself, that is, for you, it's one client, but within the company, there are many people using the product. And all of them may have different opinions. So they don't even have some common opinion about your product. And it's very hard then to understand how to use it and how to consolidate it. But it needs to be done nonetheless.
Thank you.
Sure. And I hope I answered the question too.
Sure. If you want, you could go a bit more into your specific journey of how this happened for you guys, basically.
Oh yeah.
going from individual customer, individual feedback to setting up those boards and things like that to collect it more broadly?
Yeah, I mean, our team is pretty small even now. I would say we're still very much a startup at just about 30 people. It's by no means a large company yet. So as you can imagine, all of us, we wear different hats throughout the day, every single day. And customer facing roles, I mean, I have been where I am right now at Case, I have been doing both support and success and all the different things as well. So probably at some point you start realizing that the volume is too much to keep up with. And also you have a product strategy somewhere else that is completely separate from all that feedback that is coming in. But we have to somehow try to build that bridge to close the gap between the feedback and the strategy. And when we see that something we do is not solving the problem, which I had a couple experiences of, right? We might have a feature that we have released, and we have released it as a proof of concept, let's say. We collected feedback on that proof of concept. And unfortunately, we never did any actions to materialize that feedback in the proof of concept, although the proof of concept should be that very stage of the feature where we need to implement that feedback as soon as possible, because people have actually pinpointed those issues that they see in the feature that basically does not allow them to really use it. It does not solve their problem. I guess this realization is when it becomes clear that something needs to be done with it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ilya, you mentioned personas. Are you working at your company with personas?
Not yet, but it's something that definitely needs to be done. I mean, I have had experience with personas before and kind of seeing, but that company I'm talking about where I used to work a few years ago, it kind of was more of a general purpose tool, I would say, which really does fit any company if you think about it, no matter what industry they are in. With Case, we are much more targeted, so we target a very specific audience, not just even the software developers, but a subset of software developers, namely testing engineers, quality assurance engineers, automation engineers. And so for them, obviously, the tool should be doing specific things. But again, even within those, we can potentially target different personas, because we have somebody who's a buyer, a CTO, right? Who might be quite distanced from the day-to-day activities, but he is ultimately responsible for the budget and the buying decisions. But also we have a persona of an actual engineer, quality assurance engineer, who will be using that tool day-to-day. And we need to deliver that message and the value to that very person too. So I believe that, speaking of personas, yeah, it's highly important to understand who your client is, who your customer is. And if you will always have more than one type of a customer. Usually in B2B it works that way because somebody owns the budget, but quite likely it's not the person that is going to be using the tool that owns the budget. And at the same time, you have to target all of them. You have to target both those that own the budget and those that are going to be using, so that everyone is happy and it's a win-win for all the parties involved.
Yeah, it's a big goal to make everybody happy.
It is a tremendous undertaking, and probably, oh, speaking of that, yeah, I don't think it's possible to make everybody happy. And it's kind of another level of maturity for the company too, to understand that your product probably does not fit everyone, and it never will, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Would you say with your specific target audience, do you have to be extra careful with, let's say, quality in general? Because I mean, it's kind of your target audience's job to find flaws. So do you get a bunch of bug reports that are like about super tiny nitpicks, or do you get like very well thought out, nice to read bug reports and not stuff like usual where you get, let's say, this isn't working or something like that, right?
Yeah, that actually makes my life a bit easier because our audience is quality assurance engineers and they obviously know how to write a bug report, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to explain them how to, please tell me how to reproduce the problem that you have experienced.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I can't say there is probably it's kind of a professional deformation, I guess, that quality assurance engineers tend to find flaws. And obviously when they find flaws in our products, they do not hesitate to share. And it can be both nitpicky things like one pixel went off to the right, please fix it, and down to more complex things, which are related to some complex scenarios they try to perform within the system and it does not work for some reason. And it does not even have to be a bug. It might be something about the actual flow of data or flow of the process that they have established and it does not really fit into our tool. We have to be careful, of course, about ensuring quality in our product too. And I think probably a bit more than any software that does not target quality assurance engineers specifically, because it's like, they look at you and they expect the quality from you because you're doing a product about quality. So if it's not working right, it's kind of us falling flat on our face with this and not being able to ensure our own quality while providing somebody with a tool for doing exactly that. That's true.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Seb.
Any other questions from the other ones? So it's your chance to bomb Ilya with your questions. It seems not. Okay, Ilya, would you be so kind, stop sharing your screen so I can start sharing mine?
Absolutely. Go ahead and thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Not yet.
Yes.
Which one?
I just see you personally.
Really? Okay, I lost you. Wait, give me a second.
Yep.
Okay, good. Yeah, the technique. All right. So thanks, Ilya, for being here and try to give an answer to the question: do customer define quality? It's not that easy to find concrete answers to such questions, right? So, you are always welcome. If you have other topics you would like to talk about, don't hesitate to come back again. So,
all right,
that would be awesome. I recorded the video and it will be available within the next days. I don't want to say fixed day because I give my best to have it ready until the beginning of the next week. So what's up next? Next week, we have an on-site meetup in Berlin. Severin, you are located in Berlin, right?
Yes. Yes. Looking forward to it.
Cool. So we have Flink as meetup host in Berlin, and Aya and Sergio will talk about their Android automation story and their journey to it. Very interesting. And in May, the next online meetup takes place with Philip, and he will talk about how to test API with Cypress. I hope to see everybody who's living in Berlin or surrounding areas next week in person. So I will be there and do the moderation. And yeah, also, of course, we will have an online stream for it, and also we will try to record it again, so that everybody can participate in person or online. It depends. Yeah, so that's it for today, I would say. And I wish you all a really nice evening. Thanks for being here, and yeah, have a good time and see you next time.
Thanks again. Great talk. Have a nice day.